Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today in this video we're going to take a quick look at a Sanguine Depths run that some of my guildies did this last week, or I guess this week of the recording of this video. It is the first week of the new season, so this is Heroic Week of Sanctum of Domination Raid, and it is the first week that we are seeing the new affix implemented into the game. So IOs have been reset, Mythic Plus scores have been reset, and there is a new set of affixes in the dungeons. So this week we're looking at a Tyrannical week, which is actually a lot more difficult than it was last season because of prideful buffs. So we no longer have access to those. This week it is also Raging and Volcanic. So two interesting mechanics or two affixes that we haven't seen together in a while, if not ever, I don't think. And then on top of that, we have the new affix Tormented. So in this video, I'm going to mainly talk about the run that we did. This was a time 16 though. Unfortunately, my week order that tracks like the key timer and like percentage and all that stuff stopped working. So something I had to do in this key was constantly ask, are we at the right percent? What's the time? How much time do we have left? So that was kind of weird. So you won't be able to see that in this video, but it is a 16 and we did time it, I think, with about 3 minutes left despite some errors. So I'm going to talk about the run, some of the nerfs that actually came into place when Season 1 ended, and or like when 9.1 dropped, so I think 2 weeks ago now. Sanguine Depths has become actually a pretty easy key as long as you know what to pull together and how to route the dungeon. So I'm going to talk about that, some of the mobs, and just some kind of general tips. So this video might be a little choppy, meaning that I might cut out a few sections just to kind of skip ahead so it's not a 40-minute video, but I wanted to just generally kind of just put something out there and talk about the new affix because I've been doing a lot of like testing and playing around this week as well with raiding, so I haven't been able to produce as much content. So we're going to just jump into this. So one thing I will say is that the nerfs that came into this dungeon, like I just actually said, was that it's become a lot easier of a dungeon. Some of the nerfs that they implemented have been really nice. So we saw a nerf to both first and second boss, which I'll talk about once we get there. And then there was also a few different nerfs to some of the kind of meaner trash in this dungeon, the more dangerous trash, that is actually going to make pulling this dungeon, especially with the tight corridors, a lot easier to do. So something that's kind of standard for the start of a Sanguine route is to just do some giant pull onto the lantern here to get that extra damage buff. So we have, I think, 2 Venthirs in this dungeon, so I'm gonna have the mage, the frost mage who's playing Venthir, open up the canister while I focus on obviously grouping up the mobs and just trying to keep them in place. This is a really standard pull. Some groups will even go and further and pull the next trash pull, but on raging weeks it's a little sketchy, especially when everything starts popping here. But it's not going to be too much of an issue because we're going to nuke it all down with cooldowns. This is a good place to use cooldowns in a first pull. So the damage buff you're going to get from here lasts for about 90 seconds, a minute and a half. And it depends on how many stacks you get. So for some reason, it looks like we only got 1 stack there, which is really strange because they were definitely within like the radius. So there was a nerf to raging as well. The raging nerf is, I wouldn't say noticeable because it's still scary when things enrage. Instead of gaining 100% increased damage, they only gain 75% increased damage. So a little bit easier on some tanks. Being a Guardian Druid, it's pretty easy for me to control raging, or at least easier than it is for like a Brewmaster or for a warrior, because I actually have a soothe in my toolkit, unlike pretty much any other tank actually. So it was nice being able to be like, okay, this mob specifically shouldn't be in rage because they cast at my group, so that's what target you should be soothing. I actually die here, which is hysterical. Someone accidentally, I think it was our arcane mage, arcane orbed through that pull that I just did, and it tagged the brute. So that's why that got pulled there. That wasn't intentional. That's what I think happened, like watching this back, is that Arcane Orb travels very far, very fast. And if you're not careful with your positioning, it'll clip something. And that's just a perfect example. So this was not a clean run by any means. It's not a run you should be like, wow, they did that so clean. I should just try to copy what they did. We had a lot of wipes. We had a DC on the first boss. As well as like 2 deaths. I think this was the run that I think I ended up soloing the last boss. Maybe not. So normally what I do is I pull that 3-pack and then I pull this tick with the brute, and then we go into the mini boss to get that down. There is a more effective way to pull this. This mini boss, I wouldn't say is, if you have a really strong healer, you could skip this guy. If I'm not mistaken, it's the guy who casts like the flame stuff. So with him, if you don't pull him on the last boss, he's going to basically you're going to just take fire damage the entire encounter. So if it's not a healing intensive fight, it's pretty doable. But there are some instances, like in this one with the bleeds being applied by Wicked Blade on General Call. I think that's her. Yeah, that's her. I'm like having flashbacks of PTSD of Mythic Castle Nathria. You're going to just take constant fire damage as well as overlapping damage with the Wicked Blades. Could be extremely lethal. If you have like a really, really solid healer, it's totally fine. So what he does is he essentially targets range with the Scorching Blast, which creates a pool underneath the player, as well as it will pretty much one-shot you if you get clipped by it. And then there's a cast you just need to kick. If that cast goes off, it will one-shot your whole group. Something that I always do is I forget to pick up my power still, and I think I'll be doing this all season. For this one, Crumbling Bulwark is a good choice. Just a flat 5% versatility means you're taking 2.5% reduced damage, you're doing 5% more damage, and when you enter a pull, you're going to actually take less damage for a few seconds, about 40% reduced damage for a few seconds, which is really good for some tanks, especially Guardian Druids, but sometimes when you don't have enough rage to like pool from each pull, especially if you're like shifting into cat form and stuff, you're able to then have that reduced damage so you have time to get your mitigation up. It works the same with like a Brewmaster trying to get enough stagger for a big CB. You're not going to just get one shot right off the pull, which is just a nice little power to pick up. So I recommend killing that guy, but if you can somehow like have the throughput on the last boss to like just handle the mechanic, it saves you about like 30-40 seconds. So what I've actually done is I've actually sped up the how fast this video is going to be playing. So it's about paying about 15% faster. It's at 115% speed. So this next pull, right before boss, it's weird because like you want to use cooldowns to blow it all up, but you kind of need cooldowns for boss, and you no longer have Prideful here. So that's something that was interesting this week to try to figure out, is like we used to have Prideful to get cooldown recovery for like a boss. Example, this guy, Kryxis. I think it's Kryxis. I always forget the names of these bosses when I'm talking about them on the spot. You would normally have Prideful, right? So like a lot of times you'll blow big cooldowns here to try to get this down, and then you end up just dry for boss. So just something to be aware of. Like, it might be doable to just pull him with boss now. So something that I'm going to have to experiment with, to just try to pull this stuff into boss and use big CDs plus hero. That might be really effective. Though, it is kind of scary on a raging week. And there's a lot of things going on like with kicks. So you got to make sure you're doing that. And we're going to get a quick top before we go in. So again, this boss was nerfed. So the two things that they nerfed was they nerfed the Juggernaut Rush by 15%. And they also nerfed, I think, the Essence Absorption. So if you look in the dungeon journal, you're actually not going to see this spell being listed. It's what happens when you soak the orb that he drops. So with that being nerfed, it's actually a lot easier for groups who don't have immunities. Luckily here we have like double ice block. And I think actually earlier in the week too, I was running like Holy Paladin, like Hunter double mage or something like that. Like we had just all the immunities. So it's really nice running with those kind of people, but it's no longer required now. So the smash we're still going to get away from, and then we're going to soak these. Typically, like, you're going to soak a set of 2 and then a set of 3. But this was just a rough pull. I think we end up just like wiping horribly. We not wipe, but we have a lot of deaths and DCs. So Juggernaut Rush here is actually going to be on vibe. So what he's going to do is he's going to just simply block outside of group. No one's going to soak, and then we're going to just keep doing the mechanics. Really easy to do if you have an immunity in your group. Outside of that, this boss fight's pretty straightforward. I'll eventually get to a guide on it. I've been putting this one off because it's fairly simple, and plus the nerfs have made it a lot easier. So I'm going to end up actually just skipping ahead here to the trash. Oh, so I was actually wrong about wiping to trash. So or that boss, we actually had a clean kill there for the most part outside of the DC. This next pull, I've seen a lot of different groups do a few different things here. I've seen people pull that other small room with all the little ads in it. It's a fine pull. You can do it. It's never in a route that I run. This route that we're running actually is going to be like purely brute force. If I'm trying to like remember this run. I should have watched it through before I started talking over it. If you have big cooldowns here, you can always blow this pack up. Just be careful of that raging, because a lot of these casts are going on your party members and not the tank. So as a tank player, you're not going to really feel this pull as much, but your DPS and your healers definitely will. So save those like AoE stuns and stuff for the end. Now this is another mob that was nerfed, this Sentinel. I know a lot of tanks didn't have an issue dodging this because it was a frontal cone, the Severing Slice. it used to be a frontal cone, and you used to just be able to outrange it. So like roll, you can leap backwards, you can like use some kind of movement ability, or like monks could transcend, like whatever, right? So you can use movement abilities. Guardian Druids had a little bit harder time outside of like trying to maybe like soul shape or Tiger's Dash out, but you typically don't run Tiger's Dash because of renewal. So what you're doing now, it's going to target just the person, its main target. So what's nice about this is you can actually have a hunter pet taunt. Especially with the hunter buffs, which are ridiculous, by the way. The hunter buffs that are coming in are going to make hunters like crazy good. I think theoretically they should be really strong, especially those BM buffs. BM being able to taunt mobs like that and not have it be applied to the tank is huge. Severing Slice is like the majority of the damage a tank is going to take over the course of this key from like the 4 or 5 sentinels you have to pull. And if you have a pet who can just soak it every time, is going to be insane. This second mini boss, it's really just like dodge swirls on your ground and dodge the Frostlat's frontal. The player who has this debuff circle around them needs heavy spot healing or needs to use some kind of DR. So here, I like totally forgot about the power. I like roar, I'm ready to go into the next pull and have to run back and siphon my anima. And at this point, I'm pretty much complaining about how much I hate this Affix. So that mini boss is actually probably the most stressful for the healer, but it's not like too difficult if you get him down. I think it's worth. So right there, I picked up the Pendant of the Martyr, whatever it is. It's a 10 yard, 10% AoE damage reduction, which is pretty useful in some keys. The key that I think it's most useful in is Halls of Atonement with thrash damage. So if you have everyone tuck in for the thrash, they're all going to take 10% reduced damage, and then you spread out for like the slam. So right here, this like I said before, this is a brute force route. So what we're doing is we are just we're gonna pull every overseer. It is a tyrannical week, and because of that, these mobs are gonna go down a little bit easier. With the raging, what I'm doing is I'm just making sure I'm like soothing whichever mob needs to be soothed as they hit that appropriate health percentage at that 30% mark. Especially with these like rack souls and like dread bindings and gloom bolts. So that's kind of my job here. I did it on the first oppressor, and then I did it on the overseer because the other one was about to die. We just got a refresh on our Venthyr damage buff, so now we're doing 30% increased damage for this pull. So this one should go down a little bit cleaner than the last two. Pretty effective, like pretty easily. And that's a Frost Mage burst. Jesus Christ. The Guardian Druids still have an aggro issue. Blizzard, if you for some reason you watch this, please fix. It's really frustrating. And then I feel like a lot of groups in Prideful Season ended up not pulling this Custodian. I think the Custodian's like a good percent, as long as you have a Soothe. Like if there's like one of these little gubbin dudes, dirty munch crunchers or whatever they're called, when they get enraged and start beating on your tank, they get really scary. As you can see off to like the bottom left, he ran off. This guy here, I'll end up getting a Soothe on him and it ends up killing him. So if you have a Soothe in your group, when he gets enraged, he gets like a huge health increase, but when you soothe it, he loses that health. And he dies pretty quickly. The Custodian's always been like fairly good percent if you have a group who can soothe and blow him up pretty quickly. So I've always ended up pulling him in my route. So I'm kind of used to pulling him there, but there we pulled him back because of where this Executioner is. We didn't want those little like yellow mobs running out and pulling him on accident, because I've seen that happen before. And then this guy is really straightforward. A lot of people don't know this, but his Wave of Terror cast, you need to be on top of someone else. If you're by yourself, you get feared for like 4 or 5 seconds. So this Wave of Terror cast, you move onto a DPS or another player, and then he does Carnage. He'll immediately follow it with Carnage every time. So then you spread. So it's a stack spread, and then he puts a big bleed on the tank. This is probably the mob that the tank feels the most. Also because there's reduced healing. So once again, I forgot my power. It's ridiculous. I really hate this. It feels like such a waste of time because you're not in combat. I just like, honestly, there's such like the powers are so BIS that like there's one specific power most tanks and most DPS and most healers are always going to take. I think Blizzard should just give us those powers. It's already boring enough as it is. At first I thought this Affix was going to be kind of cool when I was testing it on like PTR and stuff, and then they nerfed everything about it and everything that's fun and enjoyable about it, and it's going to be a long season. I guess that's the best way to, most polite way to put it, is that it's just going to be a long season. So because of our newly found buffs, the all the DPS probably, if they're smart, I think they did. They all took Volcanic Plumage, and what that means is it's going to just constantly keep knocking mobs up over and over and over again. So essentially what it's doing is it's adding like 20 extra interrupts to your group. So it's not really the damage gain that's big here. It's the fact that you're constantly interrupting. So it's more or less like a damage. It's like a damage reduction in a way. I don't know the exact value on it, but what we're trying to do here is pull things back to this lantern. And it's very difficult with casters, so I'm going to Moonfire and try to LOS around like the lip here, the curve. Everyone's running against the wall, but it's unfortunately to no avail. We'll still end up activating and getting a pretty sizable buff here. So some of the nerfs, they made a nerf to 2 of these like gloopy mobs. I don't know what to call them. This explosive anger that just went out on our arcane mage, who didn't dispel himself, and I couldn't get there fast enough. They nerfed that damage by 25%, so you no longer necessarily need a Kryxis spell. Just make sure you kick the spell, and if it does go off, they just need spot healing. With decurses like this, there's no reason that should have been on him longer than 2 seconds, so I just dispelled it off of Pika. He took literally no damage because it didn't tick yet. And like that's super nice. And on top of that, the Visage of Doubt no longer casts growing mistrust, which means there's never going to be poop on the ground, which like is kind of awesome, like in a way. Just not being controlled, and your route's no longer dictated by it's no longer dictated by prideful routes, no longer dictated by like that 20% breakpoint, and it's no longer dictated in this key specifically by random giant pools on the ground that you'd have to like either wait for, run through, take a lot of damage, or like will force your group forward to pull additional packs and have to accidentally chain pull. Overall, really good nerfs to this dungeon. That's why it doesn't feel that hard anymore. And then again, these sentinels, they were nerfed. They only will target their main target with the slice, so there's no positional requirement anymore for them. So melee can kind of stand wherever. And again, if you have a hunter, you can just pet taunt them, which is super nice. I have Incarn up, so we're going to go pretty big here. Just pull really nice and aggressive. Again, this plumage is kind of insane. It's going to be constantly interrupting mobs, whether it's like casts or just like if I'm kiting, it's going to knock mobs up and it's going to slow them for a couple seconds because they're in the air and they can't move. And big OE damage. The one thing I will say though, and I've already said it, is that bosses feel really bad without Prideful. And on Tyrannical weeks, like at first I was kind of like, I didn't mind Tyrannical weeks if you could like effectively get Pride onto most bosses you were going to struggle with. But even with hero buffs and even with everyone having their cooldowns, these keys kind of feel horrible to run. Some of them. So like this next boss is insane because we almost like make not a full lap, but we go like almost back to the entrance of this circle because of how long this boss takes. And I don't think our damage is necessarily low. We don't really have like crazy burst classes, but we have like some pumpers. Like the overall right now is 7.5 from the Demo Lock and 7.2 from the Frost Mage. So like we're doing big damn. I've done a boss guide on this, so I'm not going to spend too much time. I'm probably going to end up skipping through. But this fleeting manifestation just needs to get blown up as soon as possible, which we get big damage there. And then as soon as he dies, you just keep backing up. You keep backing up over and over again. And your range have to be a little bit more aware of where they're standing. Because we're running triple range DPS, like they have a little bit more freedom on this fight. But typically you want to look at the tank because where the tank is standing is, as long as you have a decent tank who is paying attention to the beams, that's all I'm doing on this fight. You know which side you should be on to not get that haste reduction. So we're gonna just skip through this guy. I think we end up killing it pretty clean. This is a good boss to have a lot of battle reses up for. It's a pretty scary pull. If people are in the wrong spot, they are gonna get. The beam doesn't do like that much damage. It's just like the fact that it slows your haste, especially for healers, makes it feel really bad. Especially if like you're behind on healing. So right there, he almost got clipped again. That's why you should be paying attention to the tank. But pretty clean kill there. Now, I don't, like, this is the weird part. I don't know what our percentage is. I think I remember asking them, and I think we are at like 66 or something like that. So the brute, if you brute force this, if you don't skip, if you don't use any invis or shroud or anything like that, you need 70%. You need 70-ish% going down. You need like 70, 71. And then just side note, I will be having routes made and I'm going to share them in my Discord. So if you're not following me on there, or if you're not in my Discord, feel free to join. It's been pretty dead lately, I'm not going to lie, but I've been extremely busy with the new patch, so I haven't been able to post content. So good place to find my routes, good place to find my UI and any kind of like links to my route and content. So here, I think, what did we hit? No, we end up, okay, so what we did here is we hit the percent that we needed to. I was debating, I was like, should we skip? Just to save time, because there's a triple pull here that's going to be pretty, it's like a Sentinel, a Mist Dancer, and an Overseer. Really difficult pull on fortified weeks. On tyrannical weeks, it's not that bad, so that was kind of my thought process. So I was jumping around back and forth. And it's really difficult. I'm so, because our weak ores were working right before this key. So Peak and I use the same weak ore, and then all of a sudden when we started this key, it just didn't work. And I didn't notice until I was like, I think we're on the first boss. I was like, oh shit, my weak ore is not working at all. So it's really hard to tell how much time is left on the key. I think at this point we have like, I think we're at like 18 minutes still. Like we're moving pretty quick through here. Again, standard, you kind of just break this up into 2 pulls. You do left side, then right side, or right side, then left side, depending on how you want to use cooldowns or however you feel like you want to pull it. So you can actually line of sight these Curse of Oppressions like around this corner here. So like right here is line of sight, and if like I move these guys into this alcove here, you could actually like just line of sight dip here to get interrupts. But with the plumage interrupting, it's not like a big deal. Like you could just kind of hope for procs and like kick what you can. But it's kind of nice when 2 curses don't go off like we just had. And then this was actually my very, very first boss guide that I've ever done. I'll have like a little card up in the top if you guys want to see it. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much like big tank buster and then group damage. So not a difficult fight, but if you don't stagger your cooldowns properly on a tyrannical week, it's going to get really, really rough. So what we're doing here, just like a quick reminder of how it's gonna work. We're gonna have people rotate their immunities and big defensives, and more people are gonna be able to pick up more of these DR orbs to take less damage from that initial burst. So there, our Arcane Mage Celeste actually used his Ice Block first. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Vibe use his Ice Block next. And I can't remember, I think he then Cold Snap Ice Blocks the third, as well as I think we get a Diffuse on one. As a tank, if you're confident in your abilities to mitigate the damage from the Iron Spike up front without using big DRs, I recommend like not picking up as many orbs. So I think here I picked up 3 because we had immunity. Any orb that is left down is wasted. So make sure you're trying to pick up as many orbs as possible. If not, you're just like wasting the DR and you're putting your group in a more unhealthy situation than you need to be. Sometimes it's difficult to actually pick up all the orbs though. So like do what you can. If you miss an orb or 2, it's not like a big deal, but try to make sure you're picking up as many as possible. This is essentially what I'm saying. And then when it comes to like these Iron Spikes, it's pretty much every like 45 seconds. So just rotate a small DR plus big DR every other time. So it's like small then big, small then big. So right here, we're having Diffuse Magic plus another Ice Block out of that Cold Snap. So we're probably going to see, I think we see 1 more or 2 more. Essentially what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just use my Survival Instinct charges and just like soak the damage. All right, nice easy kill there. So this guy's sitting right at the top. I ended up pulling him. We had a couple guys go up the right hand side and they were confused why they were in combat. They didn't see this. This guy blends in with the environment, man. He looks like just a statue, and it's really funny. Like no one ever sees him. Like I ran a theater, I think shortly after this key or last night, and someone like just blinked into him in theater. He's like in the kind of like the duel room or the duel boss. When you go in there right away, he's like off to the right, and he looks just like a statue that they felt like adding. So it's kind of funny. This guy's really easy to deal with. I don't know, like he grips people in, and then he roots everyone, and the roots get broken really fast if you just all AoE. If not, people have ways to like, you can blink out, you can shift out of it as a bear, like Tiger's Lust, Freedom, all that stuff, right? So like there's ways to get out. The Stone Ward is what you should be taking like every single time. There's no reason to take anything else. And then just a note, like drop this Shining Radiance here. If you're a tank player, you're going to take a good bit of damage right off the bat. There's going to be 2 like traps that get dropped by the hunters here, the huntsmen. You can soak those with this. It's a 65 damage reduction and it works on everything. So you just drop that here right on the pull. It'll easily be back up by the time you even get to the Gauntlet, especially if you're brute forcing. And yeah, that's just a helpful little note. You can also drop it on these Enrage as well. You can stagger it if you'd like. And then this pull is really sketchy. I always recommend doing the Overseer first because the Overseer makes your group do less damage. Because of the positional requirement now, or the lack thereof, you don't really have to focus too much on the Sentinel anymore. The Sentinel was like really painful for melee DPS typically, because they would like pat around in a weird way when you're trying to dodge the Mist Dancer as well as the Sentinel. It was really rough. So now you make sure you focus on the Overseer as fast as possible. I'm going to get the Soothe there, and then we're going to focus. Typically you focus the Mist Dancer next because of the frontal that he's doing. Is like he's just padding here. That's why he's like facing all these weird ass directions, and it's really frustrating as a tank player. So you focus the Mist Dancer next, and then you finish off the Sentinel. You can just get cleave onto him, it doesn't really matter. Everything that the Sentinel does, you can dodge. So especially like the Enrage isn't like crazy important. I'm going to use Shining Radiance there, because I know it'll be back up before the first Gloom Squall. And I needed the reduction because I soothed the Mist Dancer, and the Sentinel was still enraged, and he was about to do Severing Slice. So that's why I dropped that there. And that's what I mean. Feel free to use this. It's a 65% damage reduction. AoE, and it's like a fairly short cooldown, so if you're not in the Gauntlet yet, just drop it. You could drop it once per pull. And now time for the fun part. Having an all range group in this is really, really, really nice, and also having like Volcanic Plumage makes this insanely easy now, because it just keeps knocking things up in the air, and like nothing actually matters. So this is super easy Gauntlet now. Just if you have a bunch of melee, you need to spread out so people don't get like multiple bleeds don't get applied in one go. I think she charges only twice now, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's what it seemed like. So at 100%, we're gonna drop the Shining Radiance. But she phased, so like that's why I was hovering there. I was hovering slowly over my action button because it looked like she was about to phase, so I wanted to save it just in case I needed it. And then once we get this pull down, we're gonna go into like a nice big pull. I think we had like big CDs up, so we have a vent here, so it's super nice. So we're gonna go in, activate that, and get a big pull going. So I mentioned if you made it this far, congratulations. This is gonna be kind of a long video, probably like what 30 minutes or so. So this next pull is gonna be big, but this overall, what am I trying to say? I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't. All right, so Incarn, big pull. We're going to activate the urn, make sure people aren't getting hit by the volcanic, so we're moving away from vibe. This opens, and I'm going to tag in the stuff pretty quickly. As soon as this stuff dies, I'm going to tag in the next pull and LOS around this little like alcove corner here. Feel free to use this edge, because there's caster mobs back here that you can just like line of sight, and it makes it really easy to get them stacked up. So she does her charge, and then I'm going to, I think, tag this first Acolyte. So I'm going to tag, move in, drop Radiance, because the group's going to be here, so any casts that do go out will have reduced damage, and then it'll give me a chance to get aggro. And then what this is going to be doing is it's going to be resetting. This is our buff. It caps at 10, and each stack is 5% increased damage and healing. So we're going to keep refreshing this until we need to move on. Essentially, once everything dies, we're going to go. Gargans do reset this buff, so if you want to, if like a Gargan's coming in, you can like quickly kill the Gargans because they don't have a lot of health to reset. So we're going to roar. We're going to keep moving down. It's not going to be a big deal. This is probably the easiest pull because you also have this 50% increased damage done. So this boss is going to melt. I don't even think we need to use Shining Radiance here. So overall, this dungeon is a lot easier to do. The nerfs to several of the different trash mobs in here make it extremely easy. They don't dictate your route as much as they used to. A lot of people would have to do certain pulls in a certain way, and you'd have to kind of like backtrack or do a lot of weird skips in this dungeon, which is fun, but it doubles down on the discouraging factor where like if you mess up or you wipe, the key's dead. Like you're not going to recover. You wasted pots, you wasted cooldowns, you wasted time. So I really like the changes to Sanguine. It's one of my favorite keys to run, actually. Like it's a nice execution run. Like if you run it really well, you can time it with a lot of time left. I've seen a lot of groups already like two chesting in like 15s and 16s this week. So just like overall like a fun dungeon. And I think a lot of people are still kind of skeptical because of how this dungeon was first. The first iteration of this dungeon when Shadowlands went live was rough, and it took them a long time to make changes. Like it's been what, 9, almost 10 months since the patches or since the expansions launched. So overall, this dungeon actually feels pretty good now. I mean, still tight corridors. It's Toll the Gore effect, the Waycrest Manor effect, and the new affix. I kind of hate it. I'll probably do some kind of video of ranting about it when I feel like I want to rant for like 8-9 minutes about just the new affix and how bad it is. the mobs are pretty easy to deal with. Some of them, I feel like some groups don't know, like a lot of pugs, like the Wave of Terror is like a perfect example. I see so many people getting feared during Wave of Terror on the Executioner. It's not difficult, just like stack and then spread. It's kind of like a generic WoW mechanic. Very, very simple. Stack, spread, stack, spread. But honestly, they're not that challenging and they're not rewarding. So it feels like a waste of time. And then on the icing on the cake is the fact you have to wait for the anima orb to spawn after it dies, but sometimes it doesn't spawn for like 2 or 3 seconds, which is annoying. I know that's like such a small complaint. Like, I want my anima now. But it's just, it's obnoxious. It kills the momentum, right? Like you're running, you kill a bunch of packs, you kill a mini boss, and you're like, all right, let's go. And there's this like idea of prideful where you wanted to get like every little inch of the prideful buff when you did get it, if you weren't skipping it. And then now it's like we kill a mini boss and then we have to just sit there, wait for it to spawn, pick up, like activate the power, re-click on the power, and then choose the power because the RNG nature of which of the 3 slots is going to be in is different from each key and each time. So it's like, you can't just like auto, like just click, okay, I know that the Stygian King's Barbs is always going to be on the left, so I'm just going to always click there. And it's like the most frustrating thing. For me personally as a tank, it just feels like it kills the momentum. I've definitely even up to this point, like I just ran a key last night before I went to bed, and then I woke up and I'm doing this video. It's like, even after like doing like 15, 20 keys this season so far on just my Guardian alone, let alone all my other characters that I've been doing it on, I keep forgetting to click, and it's just annoying. It's not the way that I think dungeons should work, especially when you're up against a timer. This is already becoming a rant now at this point. So that's like my overall kind of thoughts that I'm having about this affix. It's not fun. I don't know how they can make it fun. If the powers were engaging, I can definitely see like that. I can see the value in it, right? But right now there's no value, and that's the biggest thing. So anyways, call, super easy fight. Just again, like stack, spread, like spread out when you have Wicked Blade on you, and then stack in when you need to, when she's about to do her Gloom Squall. But Sanguine Depths, again, like really easy dungeon. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We did end up timing this. I'm kind of trying to like now, you know what? I guess I'll speed this up. Click, 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 click. So we get there's the Gloom Squall, and then it's going at like 150% speed. And we get the kill maybe. So you push her 50. All right, there it is. So nice fat 16 turned into a 17 Plaguefall. And yeah, nice, easy keep. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any questions about the strategy, what I did, what I talked about, comments, concerns, please let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, take care.